Our next set of speakers is actually a sibling duo, architect Bijoy Ramachandran and Premjit Ramachandran. Bijoy is a partner at 100 Hands, a multidisciplinary design studio based in Bangalore. He has an undergraduate degree from BMS College of Architecture in Bangalore and a master's degree from the MIT. Bijoy has also attended the Glen Market Masterclass in Sydney. Founded in November 2003, 100 Hands has developed a reputation for carefully considered work which celebrates craft and is sensitive to context. The recognition of what exists leads to a more sensitive speculation of what can be. The work seeks to identify appropriate metaphors for the particular agency's exigencies of a project and our larger identity as a people, a search for the beautiful idea. Apart from architecture, he has also made 3 films. In 2005, he made Architecture and the City, a Bangalore perspective, a documentary feature on a professional practice in the city. In 2008, he produced Doshi, a film on the Indian architect B.V. Doshi, directed by his own brother, Premjit Ramachandran. This film has been screened nationally and internationally and was an official selection at the Architectural Film Festival, Rotterdam, and the Architect Africa Film Festival, South Africa. The film is also now a part of the archives at the Cité de Architecture et du Patrimoine in Paris. In 2019, he teamed up again with his brother to make Doshi, the second chapter, capturing a more introspective and philosophical persona of the architect. Premjit is a multi-talented individual excelling as a musician, filmmaker, and graphic designer. With substantial experience in graphic design and branding, gained from working with major firms in Dubai, London, and Mumbai, his professional journey is marked by diversity. As I already mentioned, he has directed the 2 films on Doshi. Starting in 2006, he has created an array of 15 films encompassing documentaries, music videos, and experimental pieces.
So thank you to Girish and to Rode for inviting me. I used to think when Girish invites me for lectures that maybe I am going to tell you how the world is or educate you. But the more time I spent with him, I realized that this actually is a profound education for me. And I hope you will keep inviting me so that I can spend time with you. And I mean, every trip, like today we went to Pataleshwar thanks to Avinash, and it furthers my understanding of what is, what maybe Khan called, the silence, the immeasurable. And so these experiences are thanks to you, so thank you. It's also amazing that I'm here today on Doshi's birthday. We have deep connections, you and I, and so many of us here today with Doshi. I'd like to differ a little bit with Madhu, of course, because we do worship him in some sense, but not so much for his architecture. Yes, I mean, we find our own ways of seeing the world and doing the things that we do, but there are bigger lessons about humanity and about, about things that matter, I think, maybe more fundamentally and that make us human. And I've learned a lot from him, from the time that I've spent with him, that I think don't necessarily make me a better architect, but I would like to think make me a better person. So, and the last thing I'd like to say is that every time Girish calls me, I hit a century, which is that I talk for more than 100 minutes. And so this time I decided that I'm not going to bore you, for 100 minutes, and that I've written everything down. And so it may be a little dry, but there are 2 benefits from it. One is that you can get to dinner early, But more importantly, I think some of the things that I want to say that are important to us in our practice, I think are relayed better if I kind of, wrote it down. And so I've taken that chance today. I hope it's not incredibly boring and worthless. So there's Doshi and me, Doshi and I, October 16th, 2022 last year. This is the last time I saw him. We were wearing matching shirts. Uh, he was completely there, remembered everything, asked me about my mother-in-law's hip, about Siddharth's football, about our practice. I mean, it's incredible to imagine that he isn't around. And every time I don't see the film, we'll watch maybe a couple of clips today, Prem will introduce it. But every time I see the film, it breaks my heart because it means that, we don't have the chance to go to Ahmedabad and have a cup of tea in that wonderful room with him. So it's wonderful to be here. It's very emotional, and I'm happy that you're doing this incredible event to bring his message, which is much larger than architecture, to the large community. At first, we have to be good people, caring, and in a way selfless, and maybe then we will have better buildings and a better society. So it's a great lesson. So here I'm going to start reading, so please, all of the emotion now will go away, and it'll just be the text. So, working in architecture as a practitioner is a bit of a slog. Long periods of doubt consumed by the fog, the ways unclear, the goals obscured. But occasionally, the parting of the clouds and brilliant light in those moments of epiphany and realization. As practitioners, we live for those moments of clarity, when universal expression finds a conduit, so to speak. I graduated in 1994. Most of you in the room are born after that, and remember with excitement, and remember the excitement and anxiety of this moment, one that passed by most innocuously. A few friends at the university paying a fee and collecting our certificates from a nondescript Sarkari office. None of the fanfare, cap and gown, angavastram, and convocation addresses that are so familiar these days. Just the quiet realization on graduating that we were now out in the world on our own. That world of almost 30 years ago seems benign, innocent, compared to the turbulent and volatile one we are in now. This is a time of momentous and epochal change. I can draw a straight line from pioneers like Charles Correa and Doshi to our practice, predicated as they are on ideas of context, prudence, empathy, and careful labor. These principles are still valid in my mind, but added to them are the ideas of morality, speed, and agility. Globalization, the climate crisis, and rapidly evolving technologies demand urgent and original responses. Do we have the luxury of thinking about beauty and meaning anymore? I would like to suggest that architecture, at its most fundamental, is still the making of places for well-being, as Richard Leplaster, the great sage, Australian sage, once said, architect. It is easy to lose sight of this when faced with such existential crisis and profound change. Here are 4 ideas that may offer respite from the ubiquitous and banal work that is produced in the name of architecture and sustainability these days. Clever material choices, checklists, and certificates masquerading as architecture. We must consider the difficult pursuit of beauty and meaning rather than just mere sustenance and accreditation, more so now than ever before. So the first one is the adoration of the joint. This is a phrase that was coined by Kenneth Frampton, and I'd like to call it tectonic beauty, to seek tectonic beauty, the way things are put together. The part of the process of working in architecture we enjoy the most is the resolution of the components that make a building. Structure, fenestration, material, and so on. Their composition and relationships, though closely related and influenced by pragmatic considerations of climate and cost, our effort is to transcend these to create places of grace and quality, where the senses meets building, haptic and visceral. This guest house for a stone processing factory is sheathed with delicately fashioned granite slivers, fixed tentatively to the southern facade almost like a timber screen, protecting the building from the harsh Hosur sun, bringing us an awareness of the counterintuitive lightness of this screen and the wonders that are possible only in this factory. This retail store on a defunct factory site brings to bear the memories of this industrial context through the preservation of some of the old peripheral walls and the linear organization of the plan. The experience of these two conditions is heightened by the archaic weight of the opaque and ponderous brick elements and the pristine articulation of the metal structure. So that's tectonic beauty. The second is deep beauty, a search for meaning. As we imagine and describe our production as architects these days, we often speak of it in terms of technique. We rarely discuss what Louis Kahn called nature of architecture. I mean, in Madhu's incredible portfolio of work, oftentimes I look at those drawings and those models and I feel that he's somehow reaching that point of absolute distilled beauty. The plans, the drawings, just distilled to the pure moment of what Alfred Hitchcock calls pure sensation. That they give you this kind of sense that everything has been removed, everything of inconsequence. So Kahn called this the nature of architecture, going back to the origins. These metaphors make evident the latent and embedded conditions in a given site, within a given culture, and for a given program. In his seminal essay, The Origin of the Work of Art, Martin Heidegger talks about architecture as the giver of presence, making us aware through its permanence, its stasis, all that is turbulent, changing, and latent in its context. And he says, first bringing to light the light of the day, the breadth of the sky, the darkness of the night. The building holds its ground against the storm raging above it, and so first makes the storm manifest in its violence. Architecture not just responding to context, but as revelation, bringing forth memory and latent meaning. We must try and articulate the abiding metaphor that encapsulates the circumstances we are presented with in our projects. These can be simple, and personal, like in that wonderful wall in Alto's summer house, a small blue tiled square embedded in a wall of red brick, bringing him the warmth of the Italian Riviera in the harsh Finnish winter. Or profound, like in Akbar's tomb in Sikandra, the tomb becoming a portal to another realm through manipulations of embellishment and sensory stimuli, giving us, for a fleeting moment, an audience with the great man. Today's trip to Pataleshwar was the same experience, that as you went deeper and deeper into that incredible primordial cave, that the embellishment, the articulation, and the finish were almost replaced by this kind of blur where you couldn't see and you couldn't even get a sense of definition. And in that blur, you were somehow lifted up because you now couldn't trust your eyes or your ears, and that in that deep darkness, something primordial was awakened. We seek to express meaning through illusion. Doshi spoke of Madurai and the idea of liminal space for I Am Bangalore. Utsin summoned the platform and the aboriginal headlands in the opera house. And in two recent schools, we use Kahn's metaphor of the man under the tree to create rich in-between places full of light and air for chance encounters and the casual interactions that lead to real learning. These places of pause are varied in scale and enclosure, allowing multiple ways of inhabitation and exchange, from gossip to performance, a society of rooms and a community of learners. I'm assuming, or I hope, Orko and Shrikant are here. They work for Rahul. They've kind of graduated and gone to Opolis, but both of them were architects on these two wonderful schools that we designed. So Madhu, again, I don't take credit for the work. I think we stand on the shoulder of all of the people that work with us. These projects are enriched by the space between program offerings. I love the point that Madhu made about going beyond program, to find kind of, this idea of pure sensation, the idea of something that transcends. And I think really in our projects, the magic is in that, in the bottom of that table that all clients give us, this thing that they benignly call circulation, this juice that binds the plan together, where actually the life of the project lies. And so they give us opportunities for negotiating the site, places to meet friends, and for chance encounters, and sometimes the chance for heightened experience, for heightened consciousness, that something about that in-between space, the stuff that happens outside of the prescribed program, is where actually the magic lies. That beautiful garden in Suncheon, for instance, where really the life of that project exists. The third is historical sense, or resonant beauty, and in his seminal essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent, T.S. Eliot talks about the central paradox of the creative pursuit. On the one hand, it is to find the new, an expression of our times, the zeitgeist, and on the other hand, it draws from the past for instruction, but also to understand the effect the new work has on the canon. Here's Eliot. And the historical sense involves a perception not only of the pastness of the past, but of its presence. The historical sense compels a man to write not merely with his own generation in his bones, but with a feeling that the whole of literature has a simultaneous existence and composes a simultaneous value, order. This historical sense, which is a sense of the timeless as well as of the temporal, is what makes a writer traditional. So both an understanding of history, of place, and also an understanding of this time, this particular time. And in fact, the understanding of history may be the easier one in those two, but each of us working in architecture is trying to express something of the now with the understanding of this history, and that's, the traditional writer. Charles Correa completed the Champalimaud Center for the Unknown in Lisbon in 2011. It is a state-of-the-art facility guided by some of the best scientists in the world, and Correa says, "What makes me most proud of this project is that it is not a museum of modern art. On the contrary, it uses the highest levels of contemporary science and medicine to help people grappling with real problems, cancer, brain damage, and going blind. And to house these cutting-edge activities, we tried to create a piece of architecture, architecture as sculpture, architecture as beauty, beauty as therapy." But for me, really, the recognition of the importance of this particular location, where the river meets the Atlantic Ocean, and from where the intrepid explorers like Henry the Navigator or Vasco da Gama hung a left out into the unknown, gives Correa's idea of opening up the center of the campus with a large ascending plaza out into the ocean incredible gravitas. That he registers this place where for millennia, all of the people who came down that river took a right to Europe, and these intrepid explorers for the first time took a left across the bottom of Africa and onto India and beyond. That this campus was, these intrepid explorers were now in this building, working on the frontiers of science, trying to cure cancer and blindness and stuff. So there's this amazing metaphorical quality to this building. And so it at once makes a deep connection back to history and gives context to our enduring tryst with the unknown. So there it is, an amazing, I haven't visited, but yeah, it looks incredible. We worked with Allies and Morrison on a competition entry for the Nalanda University in Bihar. Vastu Shilpa consultants won this competition, coincidentally. Our proposal drew deep inspiration from the site, responding in specific ways to the local conditions, and sought to create a simulacrum of a city, dense, mixed use, and with a memorable pedestrian network of streets and open spaces. The simple, almost archetypal buildings, like those massive orthogonal cloisters in Nalanda, organized to achieve complex, rich in-between spaces, brings to mind both the physical experience of that ancient campus and the metaphorical notion of the threshold as the space of pregnant possibility. And number 4, the last value, is scenius, and the idea of the beautiful process. This is a word coined by the great music producer Brian Eno, the word scenius. It is a rejection of the idea of creation as an individual pursuit of a solitary genius, and instead it credits it to the scene. This scene that you have in Pune or in Kolhapur, that this is the scene that creates the great work. It isn't the great architect or the celebrity architect. Creating the right environment and providing the impetus for meaningful creative production. David Chipperfield puts it beautifully. He says, good architecture doesn't happen naturally. It requires a conspiracy of circumstances and participants. So we need to wait for the stars to align and for these conspirators to come together for something magical to happen, and that we can't pull it out of our hat. And the great example for this is that wonderful building that Kahn worked on for 2 years. So in 1965, Louis Kahn was commissioned by the Sisters of St. Catherine de' Ricci to design a place of worship in Medea, Pennsylvania. The Dominican Mother House, as the project was called, was to have private accommodation for the sisters and public areas for outreach like a chapel, classrooms, and a library. In his drawings, we see Kahn's search for the nature of the private seminary and its public elements, his preoccupation with archetypal form and its composition, and his response to this particular site, all fundamentally negotiating with budgets and the evolving relationship the seminary had with the society at large. So Kahn was dealing with both these things. He's thinking about the project in the abstract, but he's also having to deal with the sisters who are telling him that they don't have any money, the site has particular contours, there are trees on the site, and so all of these circumstantial conditions are influencing Kahn's idealized vision for this project. The final composition inverts the earlier ideas of separation of functions and instead signifies a move to a more egalitarian sense of community. Kahn had arrived at a compact and cheaper plan from $5 million to $1.5 million that captured, in a sense, the higher ideals of the Dominican order. In fact, the first separated the place where the sisters stayed and these outreach buildings, and the last plan juxtaposes all of that into one party. And that idea is the inseparability of service and spirituality. That somehow in this negotiation with the sisters, Kahn had arrived at a plan that encapsulated the essence of the order. That the sisters did not see a difference between their spiritual lives and their service to community. So this essential understanding came as a result of this long gestation and Kahn's close engagement with the sisters. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. Though unbuilt, the project shows us that it is through these negotiations that Kahn finds that beautiful, magical plan. It emerges from these confrontations. So I wish the mayor of Suncheon told you that you needed to change everything or add another building, that maybe there may have been another dimension or another sort of, alteration to the plan. I believe that these conversations and these negotiations are what make architecture valuable. Starting our practice with these community buildings for Hope Foundation has had a profound impact on the way we work. Built on very tight construction budgets and working with local contracting teams, we learned early on to consider structure and material as central to the aesthetic and to think of our work as a result of observation, assimilation to all of these people that we're working with, and most essentially, collaboration. Working with the British architects Allies and Morrison again on Miraya, this mixed-use building in Bangalore, taught us the importance of composition and the clarity of a plan. Our interiors work to heighten the sense of the underlying order of structure, revealing its precision and creating moments of whimsy. And lastly, this is the Bangalore International Center, a public building we won in a competition. The BIC is a valid precedent for the constructive coming together of many people and of crowd-funded public institution building. We must move away from the seductive notion of the creation of architecture as some sort of immaculate conception, that some person sitting in a dark room with a napkin is now making the great diagram for the building, and celebrate it as the outcome of a genius. So the four ideas are, so this is again BIC, and so the four ideas are tectonics, meaning, historical sense, genius. And that is adoration of the joint, deep beauty, resonant beauty, and the beautiful process. So that's 100 hands, and then we'll quickly go to a short piece that I had prepared for this lecture on Doshi. So I'm just going to read that as well. It's 10 minutes, so bear with me. I remember the trip vividly. Riding south from college, Thomas Samuel and I were on his beat-up RX 100, making our way to the Management Institute. We were working on the D.Y. Patil Trophy, analyzing Mohe sir's housing at IISc, and the question of Indianness had come up. This is 1994. That wonderfully innocent and benign trope from our past. Now, Indianness is not so benign or not so innocent. Nagaraj Vastare, our great senior, had told us about William Curtis's book, which had just sort of come out, or at least it was known at that point. It was called An Architecture for India. Surely this book must have all the answers with regards to Indianness, with a title like that. So as we were riding down south, this is the first time we are coming to this institute, and we're coming into view were those delicate spouts along the compound wall, negotiating the contours, creating moments of transparency, and articulating the coming together of stone, concrete, water, and terrain. We were in without the now customary security check, riding straight through into a forest, N.S. Ramaswamy's forest. The site apparently had just one tree when they started construction. And N.S. Ramaswamy, who was the first director of IIM Bangalore, planted almost all of the trees that exist today on that campus. The first director famously nurturing what is now the lone refuge on that hellish stretch of Banarghatta Road. Winding our way through, meandering, almost lost, when suddenly the way became clear. And in that clearing was the low-slung granite outcrop, as if carved out of the Deccan Plateau itself. All choices, Sadarhali, granite, concrete, Shabad, and the all but invisible MS window frames, accentuating this sense of a monolith, an expression of this particular place. The large western wall, which is on the screen now, almost completely devoid of fenestration, almost geological, and the northern wall, all fenestration, attached so delicately to this heavy mass, separated by gardens, light, and stairs. So this facade, which is what we saw when we went, in 1994, it looks like this now, completely obfuscated. So if you look carefully at that portal, which is on the left of the image, so look for that portal in this. And all of it sort of submerged. So all of this is completely appropriated by the landscape, and a much gentler expression of the plateau is visible. Entering the wall under a deep canopy through large timber doors, we were in a room with mysterious light. From above and around corners, we seemed to be in some sort of a liminal space, not yet inside, making our way very slowly. Time seemed to stretch, and our passage seemed gradual, elastic. The scales within the first hall kept varying till we got to a space flooded with natural light from a pair of large triangular skylights. This space was encircled by bridges and terraces overlooking it and seemed like a node. Decisions had to be made. Were we going straight up, slightly to the right, dark and low, or to the left, where there seemed to be some light? And this then was that first encounter with those incredible triple height passages, the pergolas above, flooding the space with patterned light, lush gardens slowly climbing, overwhelming the space. Both of us, Thomas and I, stood spellbound. Here was something new, something we had never seen before, and yet, in our bones, we recognized it. It reminded us of something ancient, a memory buried deep in our shared consciousness. And I guess this must be what Charles Correa called deep structure. T.S. Eliot refers to this twinning of the timeless and of the temporal in the essay tradition and the individual talent, that maybe this coming together of Madurai and all of those memories and this contemporary building built, as modern as possible, that there was this kind of sudden recognition of this coming together of temporality and timelessness. The sheer audacity of it, that scale, the variation, structure and stone in a delicate dance, revealing, concealing, the landscape overwhelming. What was this? Form follows function? There was so much more going on, so much fundamental stuff going on, and it connected immediately and viscerally. The ground too was now articulated, climbing ever so gradually. We climbed up to a crest, past a small access way, through a passage between the stone wall and tall columns, to to another wide passage, again 3 stories tall, 3 times as long as the first passage. And this long connector now opening up to the library, off axis and recessed, marked with a large gateway embellished with red granite. The mid-landing of the library's primary stair projecting violently into the linear relentlessness of the 300-meter-long passage, enclosed in glass, contrasting the robust stone and concrete. Variations in theme, multiplications and exceptions, as Doshi says. The order of the building was now slowly revealing itself. A large framework, these incredible passages in yellow, the spines filled with light and landscape, onto which were delicately attached the program components. Over time, other architects have designed buildings that feed off the spine without diluting the power of this central organizing strategy. I think it's a beautiful metaphor for a place of learning. The institute providing a resilient foundation in a way, this yellow spine, a robust frame, so to speak, onto which one can continue to layer new information, knowledge, wisdom over time. We won the NASA citation in Mumbai that year, the first ever for us kids from the provinces. Kurla Varki, who had famously worked on the institute with Doshi, was on the jury. With this began my interest and obsession with Doshi and Vastushilpa's work. I spent a summer with Pavitra Ullal, Doshi's site architect on campus, drawing one section of a staircase in the MDC extension. And Doshi visited, and I remember walking around with him, hoping to learn the secret incantation to summon this magic. And he wrote a note for me. This is from 30 years ago. He says, there are many ways to create architecture, either by integrating it with the surroundings, by emphasizing it, or even by alienating. Each is a good solution, provided the building itself is as integrated as a human being, or an animal, or an insect, or a plant, etc. What one needs to do is to understand the flow, and to know the flow, you have to be in contact with yourself and the material which is used as a medium. Good luck. This is 1994, 30 years ago, 29 years ago, and I'm still working on it, this idea of flow. And it reminds me of this notion that all of us are, in some sense, conduits, that if we were prepared enough, that we showed up every day and did the riyaz, that then the genie would come and sit on your shoulder and whisper that magic stuff that makes for a great building. Just to make sure that we are ready. And so the idea of flow, artists talk about it, to be in the zone, to have a sort of red streak, that there's this moment sometimes some of us feel that we're just, everything we do is just flowing out of us. There's this amazing, image of a poet, who talks about, I think it was, I forget the name now, but she tells of an experience of standing in the field, and she feels the words of the poem coming to her. And she has to run fast to the house because she needs paper to write it down, because if she doesn't do it quick enough, it's going to go past her and she would have lost it. And we all know that, that this thing is external to us, this idea of flow, this idea of the zone. Alvaro Siza, in writings on architecture, says, they tell me that I do not have a supporting theory or method, that nothing I do points the way, that it is not educational, a sort of boat at the mercy of the waves. I study the currents, the eddies, I can be seen alone walking the deck, but all the crew and all the equipment are there. I dare not put my hand on the helm when I can only just about see the pole star, and I do not point out a clear way. The ways are not clear. That's the thing. I worked at Sangath too. That plan of NIFT in Delhi was just getting completed when I joined Sangath. How does one get to this plan of NIFT? Doshi's made-up narrative about discovering an archaeological trace to make this plan seems the only tangible way to describe the logic of those both random and archaic geometries, searching for water. Or that incredible series of shards in the Diamond Bose plan, a plan made of fragments, beautifully composed, crystalline. And then that amazing scheme for the Jain temple in Pune, taking this idea of collage to an almost geological level, as if in this mound, this artificial terrain is terra firma, like Heidegger, work that draws up out of the rock the mystery of that rock's clumsy yet spontaneous support. Here, in this Jain temple, Doshi makes the clumsy rock, that expression of spontaneous support, itself the artifact. What diagram can capture the essence of these schemes? What theory can wrap up this neatly? This is work that shows both an architect in search of his own spaces full of wonder, spaces that rise and envelope flowingly, without beginning, without end, of a jointless material, white and gold, as Khan put it. Or an architect working often with a large group of collaborators, finding the way through an intuitive, iterative, and shared process, and working around contingency, constantly negotiating and maneuvering. Rather than the precious artifact, much of this work shows the joys and struggles of these conversations. As Doshi says, for me, it's a search. It is only a search for that unknown which I have not known, neither I know how it will manifest. That's actually the essence of my work. It begins somewhere, it ends somewhere, and in that process I grow, and the work grows, and we both grow together. Thank you.